These were people trying to help me as a scientist try to package a very complicated technology to the outside world. I let this team have it because we've talked about this 10 times. I look back on that conversation with a lot of regret.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of My Biggest Marketing Mistake, the podcast where we transform costly failures into priceless insights. I'm your host, Kacy Maxwell, and I'm really excited to dig into today's story because it focuses on an experience that almost every organization will have at least once, sometimes multiple times as they grow. And that is the pain that comes when you hire the wrong agency. More on that in a minute. Now, we are on episode 7 of season 1 of this show, and we are looking for more great stories to keep this going. So if you're a CEO or a founder of an organization and you have a marketing mistake and some great lessons to share, we'd love to feature your story on this podcast. Or maybe you're a marketer and you've got a story to tell as well. We'd love to hear from you too. Record a short voice note outlining the mistake you made and the lesson that you learned, and send it to us, and we may feature you on a future episode. How to submit for both of those are in the show notes. So our quote on failure today comes from Bill Gates. He said, "It's fine to celebrate success, but it's more important to heed the lessons of failure. Failure is an inevitable consequence of innovation." And marketing and innovation go hand in hand. If you've worked around marketing for any period of time, you know how quickly it changes. And if you're going to be a good marketer, you're going to have to continue to change with it. And the only way that you're going to try new things is you're going to have to fail at some things. And that's just part of being a great marketer. And that's why this podcast exists. So if you ask almost any CEO, they're going to have a story similar to the one that we have today. Some of them might have multiple stories. And honestly, this is something in the marketing world that has given marketing a bad name. Sometimes it's warranted and sometimes it's not. And that's when you hire the wrong agency. So when you're deciding how to lean into marketing for organizations, there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? You can hire someone full-time or an entire team, or you can hire a bunch of contractors, or go the route of hiring an agency. And there's something about hiring an agency, there's an allure there of this one-stop shop, that they have all of these people that you can have access to just by signing on the dotted line. And there's this misconception that I can just hand over my marketing to this agency and they're going to take care of it. And so how do you choose the right agency? Right? Do you go with somebody who has a breadth of experience across a lot of different disciplines? Or do you focus in on just one? Do you hire an agency that's really good in your specific industry? Or do you want somebody who is up the road from your office? Or maybe it's because you know somebody that works there. These are all the common reasons that people choose specific agencies, but they often miss asking critical questions that you need to answer before you go find any agency. Questions like, who's going to manage this relationship? And how do I make sure that I enable my agency to actually serve my customer the way that I would? These are often overlooked and lead to agencies missing the mark and costing you a lot of time and budget. And that's exactly what our story is about today. Our story today comes from Chase Spurlock, the CEO and co-founder of Decode Health, an AI company that collaborates with leading pharmaceutical, diagnostic, medical device, and technology firms to improve the diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment of patients across many different medical fields. But before he launched Decode, he was actually leading another organization in the healthcare industry, a highly technical and complicated industry. And during that time, he made what he felt was the smart, safe, even obvious choice to bring in an agency to help him. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show and end up costing him over $125,000. Ouch. So in this conversation, Chase opens up about, for marketing to work, you need to have a deep understanding of your product and your customer. the pitfalls of selecting an agency primarily on industry experience, and what is expected from you as a client to help your agency win. Lots to unpack today, and we'll hear his story right after this.
You want to grow, and you need a marketing partner to help accelerate the process. At Provisions Group, we take a comprehensive approach to marketing and technology to maximize impact and growth. We work alongside you to build and implement a customized marketing plan, and we help you optimize your tech stack so you can operate efficiently and securely. Plus, our tenured fractional advisors are here to partner with you to keep your objectives aligned and create a roadmap to success.
Welcome to the podcast, Chase. I'm excited to have this conversation, especially now in my role, kind of sitting again on the agency-esque side of the business. It's going to be interesting to unpack this story with you. But before we get in there, I ask everybody who kind of comes on this show who is willing to come and talk about a mistake or a failure. What role has failure played in your life and your career that you feel comfortable jumping on a podcast and talking about it?
Well, yeah, failure comes with the territory, especially being a startup operator and, also a scientist. I think, as I was going through my training, learning from what didn't work actually allowed me to figure out what might work. And that process that I learned getting my PhD has been with me all throughout my journey as a startup operator. I think you have to learn to read the tea leaves and kind of have that intuition as to where to, plant your flag next and kind of know how to anticipate what's coming and then also make the best decision you can with the information available.
And so your story today actually takes place at a previous company. So today you are running a healthcare startup. We actually partner together. Our companies work together, which is how we got connected. But this happens at a previous company. So kind of set the scene. Tell us where we're going to start today.
Yeah, so the technology was very exciting. It was a game changer in the life sciences field, and we were really trying to understand how we should message it, how we should market it, how we should engage with a wide variety of key opinion leaders. And all the while, we were transitioning the technology from the lab to the patient's bedside. And so we had parallel paths going on the tech side as well as on the sales and marketing side. And I think one of the things I learned in that process is that it's very difficult to ride the razor blade between the sales and marketing mentality and the tech mentality, because the tech people only want to tell you what it can do today and the accuracy and all this kind of stuff, that they're very fixed on the facts. And the sales and marketing side of the house always wants to push the envelope to take you right up to the edge of lying, but not crossing that line. And so, as the leader of that organization, trying to blend both of those worlds was quite the challenge. And as we were thinking about messaging, marketing, PR, we had actually retained a firm that had a lot of rich experience in the life sciences field, and they were getting us in front of a lot of different groups and in some very interesting media outlets. And I think that tension of wanting to kind of take it to the next step was kind of a source of some pain for me personally at that particular point in time. And as I would get on these calls with this particular outsourced PR firm, they would want to say things in a certain way that I didn't feel as a scientist was quite right. And also, they weren't really minding a lot of the details as we were sharing them with them. And as I look back on that experience, hindsight's always 20/20. But as I look back on that experience, I was probably being a little bit too much of a hardline scientist, and not as much on the it's okay to be imperfect as long as the big concepts are being communicated. And these were people trying to help me as a scientist and as a first-time leader try to package a very complicated technology to the outside world and do so in a way where people could relate to it. People that may not be in your field so that they can appreciate and the so what registers.
Man, there's a lot to dig in there. And I want to go all the way back to the beginning. So you were talking about what you called this razor's edge. And this is kind of the dance of product and marketing, right? That we want to almost sell what it can be and what it's gonna be. But the product is often not there today, right? And so marketing, in essence, can set up a false expectation if you go too far down the road, right? Set this false expectation so that people get into the product and the product doesn't deliver, right? And then all of a sudden you got a bunch of unhappy people and they leave, you get no retention, you that's not great either. But if you just market the product the way it is today, sometimes you won't get those first people to come in and test it, right? It's like there's not enough features there. There's not enough value to say, I'm gonna take the leap in there. So talk a little bit about how you were navigating that up front. You had made the decision, I need help in marketing and messaging this. Like that's not as a CEO, that's not my expertise in figuring out how to talk about that. How are you thinking about how you create that message and how you kind of skate on that razor?
Well, looking back on it and where I am today, I'm a big believer that if you think you have a product, you go out and test the market and you start selling something. You get a minimally viable product out there as soon as possible. And then you have some minimal marketing from there, and then you kind of scale up. I think for seed stage companies in particular, making the investment on the product, making sure it works, making sure you can execute and operationally, um, follow through on what you say you can do. I think that that's critical. And then putting the shiny wrapper around it, the slick web page and the PR presence, that would probably be secondary in my mind. And some people might challenge me on that, but I feel like making sure your technology, making sure your product does what you say it can do is really, really important. And it's where those early dollars need to be prioritized. And I think, for us, given that we were on such a leading edge and had a technology that really hadn't existed to be able to better detect disease from a patient's blood, we were trying to basically run a simultaneous process because we knew it was going to be a tough sell. We knew that there was a lot of potential, but we wanted to make sure that we were at least testing the water sooner rather than later in a pretty significant way because we were creating a market.
So you decide I need an agency. I need somebody. How did you make the decision of agency versus hiring someone in-house or going with contractors? Was there some sort of reason you're like, this is the right thing, or was it like, I just think we need an agency?
Well, I think that bringing on, especially in the early stages of a company, making a full-time commitment or even a heavy fractional commitment to a human being is a big step. And I also think that there's a bench that comes with an agency. So if one person doesn't have expertise, they can go to the desk, next to them and ask an opinion and maybe get that unlock that is needed to get the company to the next step. So I think that is really important when you're considering bringing on someone into the team on a full-time basis versus looking at the outsource model. And I can say, because of the company you work for, that's one of the reasons why we are such big believers in an ongoing commitment to Provisions Group. Because if we have something that pops up and we don't have the skill set internally to address it, or we need to convene a war room to socialize an idea to make sure we are engaging in the best practice approach to solving that problem, it's really convenient to be able to call on your friends and assemble that team, but not have to pay for that team on a full-time basis.
When you choose an agency or work with a partner, it necessarily comes with challenges and risks. And so one of the reasons you said you chose this agency is because they had industry experience. And I know a lot of I would say both marketers and non-marketers, that is a big selling point to them, right? They want to see a case study of show me a company that's like mine or that's in my industry that you did something successful for. And often industry experience becomes really the top importance, right? It's almost like the factor of like, hey, I need an agency that does healthcare things. And there's a lot of, it makes sense, right? Because there's a lot of regulations and there's certain conferences and certain places that you need to go for each industry. And so somebody that doesn't necessarily know that might not be the best partner to work with. But this company, and again, we're not going to just dog an agency, and we're not going to just say, oh, this is all of their mistake, right? But even though they understood the industry, there was a miss in understanding the product a little bit. So talk a little bit about that disconnect.
Well, I think it's easy for groups, and I think people in general, once they learn something, they try to figure out ways to use that hammer and find a similar nail. And I think for large agencies to devote time to really understanding the technical nuance around a very specific niche case for one client, and at this point in time, we were a pretty small client, but to be able to justify allocating that personnel bandwidth to a deep dive into us was probably something that they weren't willing to do at that particular moment in time. So they had worked with other life sciences organizations like us. So they were trying to kind of adapt what they knew to us. And it wasn't quite a one-to-one, and we called them out on it. And I think in retrospect, one of the things that we should have done as table setting for this particular group would be to identify some of the key areas of concern and the do's and don'ts, and really be tight on that and have someone that is not only marketing minded shepherding that group and shepherding those dollars, but to also make sure that there is a technical counterpart at every step along the way to make sure that the business side versus the technical scientific side didn't get too far apart. And so you would be kind of minimizing any sort of, kind of back and forth editing of documents, editing of content, if you had tighter alignment on the front end. And I think that is a learning that I've taken with me since that experience.
Yeah, I think there's a fallacy with companies of what agencies can actually do and how much they can know and understand your product and service and even customer. And what I often tell people, because I talk to people all the time, and they're like, hey, I had this bad experience with this agency. I had this bad experience with this agency, and they didn't blah, 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 blah. They didn't do all the things, right? Sometimes agencies can become the whipping boys of a down economy or, any of that kind of stuff. It's the agency's fault, right? But I always tell them there are two groups in this relationship, right? There's the agency, but there's also the client. And thinking that an initial kickoff or a slide deck of this is what our product is, this is what, thinking that is going to be enough for an agency to really get everything about your business, really fully own it, fully know how to sell it, and all of that kind of stuff. That's a pipe dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the client side, you are living this day in and day out. You're thinking about it when you're not at work. I mean, you're developing this product. You're probably talking to customers all the time. And so you have such a deep understanding that when you communicate something to the agency, you've taken all that knowledge and you've put it down into a smaller thing that makes sense to you because you've got all the context around it, right? They don't have that context. And so agencies often are handicapped because when they're working with a client, the client's just not giving them enough information. And the agency's not asking for it, right? If an agency is not saying, hey, I want to sit with you. I really want to understand your business. I really want to understand this. That means there's probably going to be some more discovery time. And discovery time feels like, oh, you're not working. You're not working. And I'm like, no. We're really working hard to understand your business as much as you do. I want to talk to your customers, right? I want to talk to you. I want to understand what is new and what is shaping and what is changing with your company, because I'm not going to be able to market you efficiently if I don't really understand that. So that is, if an agency is not asking for that, that should be a red flag, regardless of whether they're in your industry or not. So anybody listening out there, if the agency isn't saying, "Hey, I want to understand you more," or if you're getting things from them and you're like, "This isn't really our voice," or "This isn't really what they do. They don't really understand what we do." It's your responsibility. Like, call that out and say, "Hey, you don't get this. We need to come back." Because one of the things that we were talking about, I'd love to kind of share a little bit of your experience. You had said you were getting pieces of content back and just spending sometimes hours like rewriting things. You're like, this is not even really what our product does.
Yeah, no, that was the source of a lot of pain. I think that's probably the best word for it, because part of you feels disappointed in yourself that maybe you didn't frame it out well enough on the front end, and then you're also disappointed that the party that you're paying was producing something that clearly missed the mark. You've got some people that can say something in a 7-word sentence that is very powerful, very impactful. But then some people can say something in a 70-word paragraph, and you're like, what are they talking about? So I think it's a really important skill. And I don't care if you're in marketing or you're in a tech field or in just any domain. I think good writing will carry you far. And thinking about this notion of, I want to go back to one of the things you were mentioning about agencies and getting that perspective and kind of locking in an answer. Establishing relationships with people, even if they jump agencies, I think is really important. And so we are a big fan of investing in relationships because we want to harness institutional memory, and we want to find people, quite frankly, that we enjoy working with, who are smart, driven people, and they might hop around from one firm to the next. And we've actually followed those people over time. One of the other issues I see young companies faced with is they've got a short runway, limited amount of cash, and they will get these engagements spun up. They will start investing those dollars, and then they'll have to pull out. And just as the group is becoming beneficial to their organization, they're having to cut it off. And so I think it's up to the company, but I think it's also up to the partner. And maybe you can talk a little bit about this, Kacy, but making sure that there's enough runway for both sides to get something out of the engagement, to have enough time horizon for both sides to not only make money, but to produce something that you're proud of.
Yeah, there were three key things that you said. One of the first one was copywriting skills, like writing skills. I'm going to butcher this, and I wish I had somebody here where I'd be like, "Hey, research who said this." Might have been Teddy Roosevelt. He said a lot of smart things, but he was asked to speak at an event, and he said, "How long do I have?" He said, "If I've got 3 hours, I can do it this evening. If I have 30 minutes, I need 2 weeks." And it's one of those ideas that if you really know something well, it takes time to get it down into a really succinct fashion and be impactful, right? And so if you can't write compelling copy that is short and to the point, you don't know it well enough, right? And so if you're getting copy back from your agency or marketer or whatever, and it's not very compelling, they probably don't know it well enough to do that. So I completely agree with you. Copywriting,
Well, it was Twain too, I think, who said something along the lines of, "I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead."
right, right. Yeah, I mean, it comes down to creating complex ideas in a simple way. You got to know what is the most important pieces of it, so that you can get rid of all the other things. Um, the other thing you mentioned was about staying with people that you trust. One of the reasons why we have been so successful for the last 20 some years is we have followed people to new companies, right? Somebody would come in, work with us at one company, they would leave and go to the next company, and then they would bring us there, and we would stay at their old company. And then they would go to a new company, and they'd take us to the new, and we'd stay at the old one. And it wasn't anything that we were like, oh, hey, they're at a new company, let's go hammer them. Like, yes, sales would go talk to them, but people like working with people, and it's working with people that you actually enjoy and that it's easy. That is that is really, really important, right? And so creating that relationship is really key. But I think you're right. There is a time horizon expectation of delivering on a promise that was set up in pre-sales, right? So any engagement that you're going to work with a partner, marketing, technology, any of that kind of stuff, there is some sort of promise made before a signature, right? And whenever that signature happens, that clock starts ticking, especially for the customer. Yes, for the vendor, yes, they're thinking, "Oh, well, we got work to do." But when it comes to value, like providing value as fast as possible is really important. And so there is that dynamic of what signs of success are you putting in place, or is your agency putting in place, so that you see progress, right? You're not going to sign, like it'd be awesome if you signed on the dotted line and all of a sudden, all these leads came in, or all of a sudden your website was live, or any of that kind of stuff. And that obviously doesn't happen. But making sure that you have the right expectations of, this is what progress is going to look like, whether it's, hey, we're going to have a discovery session and we're going to map a set of personas. Oh, yes, good. Yes, those personas are who our customers are, right? You feel this progress as it's going. And you've got to, like, I've said this on other episodes, is that marketing is often more of an art than it is a science. Because yes, people can try the same things, like you just said a few minutes ago. I got a hammer. I used it at a company that's similar to yours, and it might work for you, right? It worked in the industry, it worked for them. Let's try it. It may not work, right? That's why there's so much failure in marketing, because it is this sort of like, is it going to work for this company in this set of circumstances? And if you're not willing to allow an agency or a partner to fail and to try new things, you're going to keep jumping. You're going to constantly be unsatisfied with the contractor that you brought in that immediately didn't do something, or the person that you hired that was supposed to revolutionize everything and change your whole business overnight, or the agency that is trying to learn you and move you forward. So understanding you and giving some of that bandwidth in the beginning, I think, is really, really important. I'm really glad you brought that up. That's something that I think if you have that right expectation, it's going to make that relationship a lot better.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of groups, when they're trying to win business, particularly in this marketing world, and having sat through a bunch of those pitches, they try to act as if they're coming down from the mountain with two stone tablets and saying, "This is how it's going to be, and this will work." They're trying to project confidence, but I think, as you were kind of describing, your perspective, it's important to also leave a little bit of wiggle room to say, this is our best thought today. And then as we walk along this journey over the next several months, weeks, if not months, we're going to learn a lot. And we will likely try to refine the strategy as we're in flight. And I think that that's a critical expectation to set, because I see a lot of entrepreneurs and small companies that want to take whatever their vendor is telling them, take it to the bank, and this is how it's going to be. And they would get really bummed when it doesn't pan out. There are certain situations where you need absolutes. We will do these 10 steps and we will then have X at the end of that. There's a time and place for that. But in these more marketing driven conversations, there is no magic formula. I think it's trial and error, but I think it's targeted, experience driven trial and error that you're really looking for.
Yeah, you don't want to work with someone who comes in and goes, y'all, I don't really know what could work for you. And I would love 90 days to just kind of try a bunch of stuff, right? Nobody's going to say, yes, sign me up. Here's a $30,000 retainer, right? So you want someone to come in with a point of view. And we have point of views on certain things, right? We think there are certain ways to approach things, but giving a guarantee of something, of saying this will do something, is probably not what you should be looking for with a marketing partner, right? Because a lot of times they're just kind of making it up, right? They're like, well, if all the factors align, then yes, this is what will happen. Or when we've done a similar set of things for another customer, this is what happened. But I love coming in, and I would look for people who have these point of views, but exactly what you said, that they give room for variance of, hey, based on what we're going to do for you, or what we're thinking is going to work, like let's walk down this path. But if we see that it's not, let's start pivoting and let's put up the milestones in place so that we can do that. But I always really want to understand my clients and our business. We really want to understand, one, what you're trying to do, your market, all of that, before we just start promising these things. Because that's why agencies, and I think marketers in general, get a bad rap. They promise too much up front. And that's what a CEO, or, you want to hear. Like, they're saying all the stuff. Hey, we're going to spend this money. You're going to make this money. And a CEO is like, yes. That's also why one of the biggest pain points for CEOs is like, I don't feel like I'm getting the right return for my marketing investment. They constantly feel that because they're promised the world, right? And then that's not the way that marketing actually works. And some marketing takes time, and so I think it's really, really important setting expectations and making sure that they know you. So Chase, one of the things that we were discussing before the show, when we were talking about your story, was that there was this building frustration that was happening with your agency that actually led to this blow up in a meeting where you really lost your cool and kind of let them have it, which is honestly really outside of your character. So part of this is you had invested north of $125,000 and you weren't getting what you wanted. But tell us a little bit more about that and how long this had been going on up to this point.
I would say it was on the order of months. And I think what fueled it too was also some consternation from within the team. It almost became a loathing to get on these recurring weekly calls. And it was something that we felt like we had to do because we were making the investment, but it felt like you were pushing the boulder up a hill. And I think, a combination of travel and also having a lot going on this particular week, and then having had a deliverable come over that I had to then edit and basically shred, to then have a response that may not have appreciated all of that internal turmoil and may not have recognized that we had been giving them grace for many, many weeks, I think was the match next to the can of gasoline. And I think for people who have worked with me, they know that it takes me a while to cook, to get to that point. But we actually had a call one day where we're all huddled around the table. This call would take place on a weekly basis, and I just spilled over. I just couldn't take it anymore, and I let this team have it because it was like the constant repeat of, we've talked about this 10 times. It's something that y'all should really be helping us be mindful of. And I look back on that conversation with a lot of regret. And one of the things that is we've considered long-term relationships, once we make a selection, we're making a commitment. Yeah, you're making a commitment to us to provide a service, but we're also making a commitment to you. And we intrinsically like you if we're signing paperwork. And to go back through the fun house of finding someone else is something that is a bit of a barrier to us running away. And so there is a natural desire to work together and to figure out a way to make it work, but you cannot allow things to fester. And it's really, really important, I think, for both sides to have honest, frank communication when things are going great, and then also when things are going not so great. And looking back across not only this particular use case, but also other outsourced, particularly like solo practitioners that have been in our orbit over the years, when you're not honest, when you're kind of skating past the truth, that's when things really get bad. And so I think one bit of advice, and something that I've even struggled with, is setting the table on the front end for there to be that recurring evaluation and frank conversation. Creating space for that, I think, is really key to making sure that both sides have a good experience. Because if both sides are having a good experience, it's going to ultimately mean that the project or the product or the technology, fill in the blank there, is going to be that much better.
Yeah, I think there is this. If you think about it from, I'm trying to bring someone on the team, right? If you're going to invest and hire someone to be on your team, you're going to go through an interview process. What you don't want to do is just hire someone with a pulse, right? Which is kind of, if you do that, then the amount of time and energy you're going to have to invest in that person is going to be terrible, right? It's going to suck up all your time, and the thing that you brought them in to do, you're actually still doing it, right? Plus you're paying their salary. We often don't translate that same sort of thinking to an agency. There's this sense of like, well, I can just hire and fire them easy, right? But what a bad agency pick can do is cost you a ton of not only money, but just time and energy. And obviously it was causing you additional stress, right? You brought this other group on to take things off your plate, and they weren't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you brought them in to write blogs or press releases, and you were technically writing them, right? Yes, they had sent them to you, but you were rewriting. And so I think it's an important lesson to, like, it's always important to hire slow and fire fast, right? That's just a leadership principle, but it's the same thing with agencies. Like, take your time to find an agency. Don't go with the first one that just has a slick website, right? Or a great sales pitch. Like, think about, hey, I want to invest in this agency. Because if you hired somebody on, and maybe some people do this, probably a lot of people do, but they bring somebody on and they're like, all right, marketer, figure it all out. I've been in that situation, so I know it happens quite a bit, right? The difference is they're running around in your company and they can go talk to people and it's easy and they have access, right? Agency doesn't do that. So you need to think of, like, one of your solutions, which I think is a good solution, is you need someone on your side to be that connection point to an agency. If that's just going to be the CEO is not going to have a ton of time to invest in that relationship. Just like a CEO, for the most part, depending on the size of the company, is not going to have endless amounts of time to mentor and grow a young marketing coordinator on the team, right? So they're either just going to come in and they're just going to, fly in the wind over here, or maybe they'll figure it out, right? You need to think of an agency partnership as, hey, I'm signing paper with this group. All of a sudden, I have an obligation to them for them to succeed, just like as if I was hiring somebody. So thinking through and taking your time and really, really understanding what that is. And sometimes you may need someone to help you find an agency. If you don't know what you're looking for in marketing, the first person that comes up to you and tells you, hey, this is what marketing should do, and they give you a very solid plan with a lot of definites when they've had 3 conversations with you and that they propose to know every single thing about your business, I would worry about that, right? It just takes time and it takes an investment on both sides. So think about hiring an agency the way that you are thinking about hiring someone internally, because it's going to cost you what you just went through, right? Like you signed a retainer and it was thousands of dollars of a monthly retainer. It was a bunch of months of time and energy, and not to mention the stress and just your time that was doing a lot of the work. And that can happen if you get the wrong agency partner in place. So what would you recommend your previous self or anybody else that's kind of in this situation, looking for an agent? Should I hire an agency? Should I bring in a marketer? Should I hire someone fractional, a bunch of contractors? What would you recommend based on your experience at this point?
Well, I think the recommendation is probably going to be a little different based on the stage of the company, but I would say, for very early stage companies, I would start small and be very prescriptive. Be very prescriptive on what it is you need in order to get to the next inflection point, and then try to find people who can support you to get to that very well-defined inflection point. And if you can do a period where maybe it's 90, 120 days where you're kind of in a test period, and both sides are willing to bite that off and really commit to executing well within that period, I think that's going to tell you a lot. And what you don't want to do is get saddled with a multi-year commitment, and also milestones in that process that are murky to where you're not going to be able to quantify value at the end of what could be a pretty substantial cash investment for an early stage company. So I think be tight on scope, tight on a timeline where you basically have that frank check-in to say, is this working for you? It's not working for me. So what can we either fix, or should we just cut bait and move on? So it helps kind of eliminate the dollars. It also helps eliminate the time wasted if you need to reassess and go in a different direction. So I think just being as prescriptive as you can, and it goes back to your writing skills. Putting on paper exactly what the definition of success looks like, and having people around the table. Could be board members in an early stage company. It could be your other team members, to make sure we've prioritized the right areas. Could be advisors, these fractional advisors that are often around early stage companies. Have someone else kind of look at it, and then determine next steps.
That's great. I think that will be helpful for lots of people in a lot of different situations. There's the, hey, I want to go all in, or long-term contracts. Obviously, we do long-term engagements, but we also do the sort of quote unquote try before you buy. But the key is there are a specific set of deliverables that you want to put in place so that you see forward momentum and you see that you're moving in down the path. And what I would say, just for what it's worth, those deliverables should not be a set of very specific tactics. What I mean by that is saying, we'll post 3 times a week. We'll write 2 blogs. We'll send 4 emails a month. There's something that kind of gets caught up in people's minds of like, activity is the most important thing, and it's not. They're like, okay, in these 90 days, how many emails did you send? Well, is email even the right thing? Do you even have an email list, right? Maybe in those 90 days, we got to build an email list, right? Or do you even have anybody on social, right? Like we posted 3 times every week and nobody engaged with them ever because we don't even have, our people aren't even in social media. They're not in this channel or this network or this X, Y, and Z, right? So don't just look for tactics. Make sure that they understand the strategy behind it. And you set up those milestones and those KPIs that is going to show that they are picking the right channels and moving your business forward, not just giving you the same hammer that they used for somebody else. So, well, Chase, this has been great. I think this has been really helpful. I know that there's not a one size fits all for the answer to this conversation, right? There's not in every company, in every stage, the answer is hire an agency or hire a contractor or do that. But I think that we've been able to unpack some different things that you should think through. And the biggest thing is slow down and make sure that this is the right partner for you so that y'all both can win. Well, Chase, thanks again. I know that this podcast is going to help a lot of people as they work through this decision, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the My Biggest Marketing Mistake podcast. We hope you got a lot of valuable insights that you can apply to your business today. And we're not done. We've got a lot more great stories of failure coming your way. So be sure to follow us on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, or check us out on YouTube. And be sure to leave us a rating and review because it helps a lot. Now, here's what's coming up on our next episode.
We saw a few breakthroughs in the past 3 or 4 months and started getting more inbound leads coming into the site. And it was a game changer. And that's when I realized like, hey, our issue is not sales. Our issue is marketing.